Hey kids, welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank and I hope you're having a great day. Today we are going to be sitting down for a few minutes and discussing tabletop RPGs, vintage tabletop RPGs with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Sometimes called second edition, but I just call it what it says on the cover. It says AD&D on the cover, so I'm going to call it AD&D. This is not a version I'm entirely familiar with. I do own some books, and I have a bit of a history with it. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9 years old, I think, my mom, who was really into a lot of nerd culture, pulled me aside and asked if I wanted to play a game with her and some friends. And I was like, yeah, Mommy, of course. And we went over to a table and sat me down, and there was some paper and some dice. And I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't try to get into tabletop RPGs until much later with 3rd edition, which was designed by Wizards of the Coast after they bought the IP. And after experimenting with that for a bit, I did fall in love with Dungeons and Dragons, and it kind of got hard for me to move on from 3rd edition when 4th edition was released. That's why I moved over to Pathfinder, because it felt so similar to 3rd edition D&D. And sometime around the release of 4th edition, and me and my play group going, we really don't want to play 4th edition, we did try some other things. We tried GURPS, which was awful. We tried Big Eye Small Mouth, which was very awful. And we tried AD&D. And I forget exactly where I got these books. I think I bought them off of a friend. I've played a few sessions of this version now, both as a player and as a DM. And I've read through the books I have. And I don't fully understand everything, but I do have to say, when comparing Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition to Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, I often say that 3rd edition is what you want to play if you want options, and 5th edition is what you play if you hate options. I feel kind of the same way when it comes to comparing AD&D to 3rd edition. Now, I'm not saying that 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons doesn't have a lot of options. It does. It has a lot of options. What I'm saying is that AD&D has way more options. And not just like things like feats, because it's not really a thing for AD&D. Instead, it's just descriptive options, roleplay options, flavor things, charts, all kinds of crazy nonsense. These books have a lot. Now, you can just play this edition with just the player's handbook. This does technically have everything you need. It has all the instructions you need to make a character and how to play the game, accompanied by some fantastic art, including the art on the cover. All of these black books I have art by the same artist. What's his name? It's credited here somewhere. Jeff Easley does a great job. And like I was saying, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so this book does have everything you need to make a character and get started with your friends. You can make a character with just this, get started, and have a good old adventure. But if you want to have as many options available to you as possible, you got to get some other books. There's obviously the Dungeon Master's Guide, which most versions of D&D have one of these. And this just gives you useful tips as a DM. It goes over a bunch of options for how to dish out treasure, what magical items to give, tables for what kind of characters they can encounter, moral ratings based on situational modifiers, and a lot more. It also gives a detailed breakdown of how combat works, which is very efficient and useful. This is the Skills and Powers book, which goes over not just like skills like swimming and perception, but also things like how your physical abilities are. Not just strength and dex, because those are important. Those are elaborated on in the core rulebook, but I believe this book has the rules for like determining how big your muscles can get. Yeah, right there. Boom. There's a whole table. Just for figuring out how strong your dude is. It's nuts. I love it. And obviously I don't have all the books for AD&D. I've just got a few. This one here is for combat and tactics, and this goes over things like ship-to-ship combat, how to fight in a marshy terrain, how to battle, ways you can battle on the side of a mountain, dealing with things like locks, wrestling. Wrestling rules were introduced here. Assisting others in combat. And all kinds of cool effects, including, I believe, this book goes over all the additional rules for critical hits in combat as well. Normally in D&D, at least in modern D&D, a critical hit is just extra damage. But in AD&D, critical hits can do all kinds of crazy stuff. You can break someone's weapon, I think. I know you can make them bleed, and some other things. And again, I'm not the most experienced with this version of Dungeons and Dragons. I've only played a handful of games, really. But I did enjoy the emphasis it seemed to put on roleplay. And now maybe that was just the game master I had at the time, or maybe my interpretation of the book. But there was a lot of emphasis, I found, on actually role-playing. Not just saying, oh, I do X action and then roll a dice. This game wants you to be descriptive. It wants you to be the character that you're playing as. It wants you to immerse yourself in the game. And I think it does it in a very natural way. Instead of talking about how it wants you to feel represented in the game, some of the books use very interesting language. Like it says, you do this, not your character. It says, you take this action. You can wrestle with the ogres. Please don't wrestle with the ogres. There really is some nice art here. Anywho, I don't have a lot more time. I just wanted to give a brief discussion about AD&D. I'm not the most knowledgeable about it, but I think it's a good version of the game. And if you haven't tried it, give it a try. You might really like it. Anywho, if you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing. I'm not going to be doing push-ups in the end of this video. I broke that promise. I'll explain why in the next video. But for now, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.